You're listening to ITR,
Irish Tourist Radio
podcast.
Chapter 1. Echoes on the Western Wind Soundscape. A strong, consistent Atlantic wind, distant cries of seagulls, the rumble of crashing waves. Dr. Maeve O'Connor pulled her worn tweed coat tighter against the relentless wind that whipped across the cliffs of County Clare. Below, the churning expanse of the Atlantic gnawed at the ancient rock, an endless primal roar that had echoed through millennia. It was a sound that had always called to her, a constant reminder of Ireland's untamed spirit and the layers of history hidden beneath its rugged beauty. Maeve, a name as Irish as the land itself, was a historian, an archaeologist, and, some might say, a woman obsessed. Her specific obsession? The Knights Templar. Not the romanticised Hollywood versions, but the enigmatic order of warrior monks who, according to whispered lore, had left a deeper, more profound mark on Ireland than any historical text dared to admit. Her grandfather, a local antiquarian from Slane, had ignited that spark in her as a child, filling her imagination with tales of Templar secrets, hidden relics, and a legacy far richer than mere gold. He spoke of a secret chapter house in Slane, a place where treasures from the Holy Land, secrets beyond measure, were supposedly interred. For years, Maeve had followed the breadcrumbs of myth and obscure historical footnotes, earning her PhD from Trinity College, Dublin, yet never abandoning the childhood dream of proving her grandfather's wild cader. Theories. She had spent countless hours in dusty archives across Europe, her fingers tracing faded Latin script, her mind assembling fragments of a puzzle no one else seemed to see. Each forgotten parish record, every cryptic inscription on a crumbling monastic stone, was a new piece in her grand design. Today, however, she wasn't hunting for relics in the familiar haunts of Leinster. Her current research had led her to this isolated stretch of the western coast, far from the well-trodden paths of scholarly pursuit. A peculiar detail in a fragmented 16th century manuscript, a footnote regarding a Merovingian cross at the western edge, had drawn her here. It was a long shot, but Maeve followed hunches like a bloodhound on a scent. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges and bruised purples, Maeve noticed a lone figure emerging from the swirling mist further along the cliff edge. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with the easy gait of someone born to the sea. Even from a distance, his eyes, when he finally turned towards her, held a striking, almost unnerving intensity. The man introduced himself as Liam Kelly, a local fisherman. His voice was a low, resonant baritone, weathered like the sea itself. "Dr. O'Connor, isn't it?" he asked, a knowing glint in his piercing blue eyes. "Heard you were poking around these parts. Got something I reckon you'll want to see." Maeve's archaeologist's caution immediately flared, but a deeper, more primal curiosity pulled her forward. This wasn't a casual encounter, it felt like fate, or perhaps destiny calling. Intrigued, she agreed to follow him. Liam led her to a small, stout fishing boat tethered in a rocky cove that Maeve hadn't even noticed. The choppy waters seemed to part for Liam as he expertly navigated their small vessel towards a shadowy mass of rock just offshore. As they drew closer, the mass resolved into a small, uninhabited island, its craggy cliffs riddled with dark, inviting apertures. The air grew colder, heavy with the scent of salt and damp stone. Liam guided them into a hidden cave, barely wider than the boat itself. The interior was a cavernous maw, surprisingly vast and silent save for the drip of water. In the dim light filtering from the entrance, Maeve's eyes adjusted, and she gasped. There, at the heart of the cave, stood an ancient stone altar. It was massive, weathered, and covered in intricate carvings that pulsed with a primordial energy. Symbols she recognized from countless hours of study: Celtic knots, spirals, and what appeared to be faded, almost indistinguishable Templar crosses mingled with patterns utterly alien to her. "Found it while checking my pots after a storm," Liam explained, his voice hushed. "Always felt different, this place, like it was waiting for someone to find it." Maeve moved towards the altar, her fingers tracing the cold, rough stone. She ran her hand over a particular symbol, a crude yet unmistakable triskelion, the ancient three-branched spiral of pre-Christian Ireland, deeply incised into the stone. But intertwined with it, almost fused, was another, fainter mark, a partially eroded Templar cross. It was the same anomalous fusion she'd noted in her journal from a moss-covered stone at Slane Abbey. A shiver, not from the cold, ran down her spine. "It's more than just a carving, Liam," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle lapping of waves. "It's a cipher, a key." Liam simply nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. He hadn't just stumbled upon a curiosity, he had, unwittingly, opened the door to a past that whispered of secrets, power, and perhaps a bloodline that time had forgotten. Maeve knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her bones, that her lifelong quest was about to take a turn into territory far more dangerous and far more profound than she had ever imagined. Chapter 2. The Exile's Shadow. Slane, 656 AD. The chill mist of a nascent Irish dawn clung to the ancient oak trees that crowned the Hill of Slane, a place already steeped in forgotten ritual long before the arrival of any now. Saint. Prince Dagobert, a youth whose golden hair was now dulled by weeks of arduous travel, and his once princely robes replaced by the coarse wool of a peasant, shivered, though not entirely from the cold. Fear, a constant companion since the shadows had fallen over Austrasia, tightened its grip on his heart. He looked back, imagining the vast, dark expanse of the Irish Sea he had just crossed. He, the rightful heir to a Merovingian kingdom, was reduced to a desperate fugitive. His father, King Sigibert III, was murdered. His own fate, a cruel exile, was orchestrated by a treacherous court eager to sever the royal bloodline. They believed him dead, or worse, forgotten, in this barbarian land. But his loyal few had spirited him away, across perilous seas to this green island, to the care of the Irish Church, specifically to the monastery atop this very hill. A soft, melodic voice broke his reverie. Brother David. A monk addressed him in passable Latin, his gentle eyes belying his stern cowl. The sun rises, and with it, new duties. Bishop Ark awaits you. Dagobert, under his assumed name, bowed his head, a gesture of humility alien to his noble upbringing. He followed the monk into the simple, unadorned stone chapel. Bishop Ark, though advanced in years, possessed an aura of quiet strength. His keen gaze seemed to penetrate Dagobert's assumed identity, straight to the royal blood pulsing beneath. "You have come far, my son," Bishop Ark said, his voice raspy with age but clear. "And you carry a great burden." He gestured to a faded mural on the chapel wall, barely visible in the dim light. It depicted a ship sailing under 3 stars, a lion standing beneath a gnarled tree, and a sword plunged deep into a verdant hill. "These are not the symbols of the Christian faith, Father," Dagobert observed, recognizing the ancient pagan motifs of his own people, yet imbued with new meaning here. "No," Ark replied, his voice a whisper. "They are older. They speak of lineage, of sanctuary, and a truth far more profound than any king's crown. Your lineage, Dagobert, carries a seed, a sacred seed, long protected." Dagobert turned, a spark of hope flickering within him. "You believe the old bloodlines still hold power?" Bishop Ark's weathered face held a deep, knowing calm. "More than power, young king. They hold purpose. Your path, though veiled in exile, is part of a greater tapestry, one that even the saints and the very ground beneath us whisper about." As the distant sound of morning bells drifted across the hill, summoning monks to prayer, Dagobert didn't know that his simple exile to this quiet corner of Ireland would unknowingly become the crucible for a secret that would echo through the centuries. He couldn't foresee his eventual marriage to Slane Ingin Nail, daughter of the High King of Tara, a union of love and ancient prophecy. Nor could he know that their descendants, and the sacred legacy they carried, would become the very heart of the mystery that the Knights Templar would later die to protect, a secret that, over 1,000 years later, a sharp-witted Irish historian named Maeve O'Connor would begin to unearth. Chapter 3. The King's Daughter and the Whispering Stone. Somewhere off the coast of Ireland, 586 BC, the old man, his beard a tempest-tossed white, clutched the wooden staff like a lifeline. He was Jeremiah the prophet, his eyes, though weary from relentless travel, still burned with the fire of divine purpose. Beside him, huddled against the spray, was Teffy, the young princess of Judah, her royal robes replaced by simple, practical garb. Her face, pale and drawn with grief for the fallen city of Jerusalem, and her blinded father, King Zedekiah, held a fierce, quiet resolve. They were refugees, remnants of a shattered kingdom, borne across the relentless waves towards a mythical island at the edge of the known world, Ireland. Legends whispered of a green land, untouched by the great empires, a haven chosen by an ancient guiding hand. But more than their lives, they carried a burden of unimaginable spiritual weight. Below deck, lashed securely against the violent pitch and roll of the vessel, lay the true heart of their exodus. A long, rectangular chest, meticulously wrapped in layers of sailcloth. No one, not even the grizzled Phoenician captain, dared to question its contents. Only Jeremiah and Teffy knew the truth. Within that simple wooden casing, the most sacred artifact of their people, salvaged from the ashes of Solomon's temple, made its perilous journey. The Ark of the Covenant. Not the gold-plated showpiece of the high priests, but the original Ark, the vessel of God's covenant with Israel, carrying the tablets of the law, Aaron's rod, and the pot of manna. Its presence on board hummed with an almost audible power, a silent promise in the face of utter despair. Days blurred into weeks. The sea tested their resolve, but the prophet's unwavering faith remained their anchor. Finally, the ominous grey mist parted, revealing a coastline of emerald green rising steeply from the churning blue. Majestic hills, untwitched by the Babylonian legions, promised sanctuary. They landed in a secluded cove, the silence broken only by the cry of gulls. Jeremiah, his aged legs trembling, was the first to step onto the damp Irish earth. Teffy followed, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and hope. They were met not by hostile warriors, but by a small delegation of robed figures, Druids, their faces painted with ancient symbols, their eyes wise and ancient, observing them with a profound curiosity. They were led by a towering man, Eo Chade, a high king whose lineage stretched back into the mists of time. There, on the sacred Hill of Tara, the very heart of ancient Irish kinship, a ceremony unlike any seen before took place. The Ark remained concealed, its power felt but not revealed. Instead, it was a union of blood and destiny. Teffy, daughter of Judah's last king, was presented to Iachade, the High King of Eire. A marriage was proposed, not of convenience, but of prophecy. It was a joining of ancient lines, a convergence of traditions, whispered to be foreseen in the very stars. Teffy, though heartbroken by her past, recognized the solemnity of the moment. She carried not only the hope of her direct lineage, but also the weight of an unrevealed, deeper covenant, a future connection, a sacred thread yet to be spun through the generations. This was a new beginning, a preservation of a seed that, in time, would blossom in unforeseen ways. As the sun set over Tara that evening, casting long shadows across the ancient standing stones, Teffy knew her future was irrevocably intertwined with this enigmatic land. The Ark, her silent companion, would be hidden deep within the heart of this sacred soil, awaiting a time when its secret, and the lineage it guarded, would be brought to light. She just didn't know how many millennia, and how many layers of history from Roman legions to zealous saints to crusading knights would need to pass before that sacred truth would finally begin to stir. Chapter 4. The Unwritten Years. Galilee to Ireland, early 1st century AD. The dusty roads of Judea and Galilee were well trodden, their stories etched into every stone. The Gospels, though revered, offered a curious silence, the lost years of Jesus Christ. From his childhood appearance in the temple at the age of 12 to his emergence as a preacher nearly 2 decades later, the historical record, both biblical and secular, remained notably silent. For centuries, Orthodox scholarship dismissed this void, assuming a quiet life of carpentry in Nazareth. But for those who sought the hidden truths, those who recognized the patterns of sacred lineage and concealed knowledge, this silence was not emptiness, but a deliberate void, a carefully constructed secret. What if, during those unwritten years, the Nazarene journeyed beyond the familiar landscapes of his birth? What if, guided by ancient whispers of a hidden sisterhood, a land of verdant mystery and spiritual power, he sought refuge or revelation in the Celtic West. The theory, suppressed for millennia, painted a radical picture. It suggested that a young Jesus, a figure already steeped in esoteric knowledge passed down through generations of initiates, found his way to Ireland. He arrived not as a messiah to an awaiting flock, but as a seeker, drawn by the vibrant spiritual traditions of the Druids and the wisdom of a people who still honoured the land as sacred. Here, in a land far removed from Roman legions and zealous Sanhedrin, he encountered a world of stone circles, whispering forests, and a deep, intuitive spirituality that resonated with his own teachings. And here, in the heart of that untouched world, nestled amongst the ancient royalty of Tara, the unimaginable occurred. He met her, Branwen, a princess of a powerful Celtic clan, her lineage tracing back through millennia, perhaps even touched by the blood of Teffy herself. She was a woman of fierce intellect and profound wisdom, deeply connected to the old ways, the ancient sacred geometry woven into the very fabric of the land. Their union was not a matter of political alliance, but of spiritual destiny. A marriage, quiet and clandestine, yet sanctioned by the ancient Celtic rites and overseen by the most trusted of the Druid elders. From this union, a child was born, a son. This was the ultimate secret, the grandest of all conspiracies, a direct, biological bloodline of Jesus Christ, established not in the sands of the Middle East, but in the green heart of Ireland. This new lineage, intertwined with the already established royal and spiritual lines of the Celtic kings, was then folded into the pre-existing system of protection that had guarded the secrets of the Ark of the Covenant and the legacy of Teffy for centuries. The guardians of the Ark, the wise Druids who recognised the profound significance of this new seed, understood that this was not merely a king's line, but a sacred inheritance, a new covenant that required absolute secrecy. The lost gospel, alluded to in fragmented whispers across the centuries, was not a narrative of miracles, but a chronicle of these unwritten years, a testament to this hidden union and the continuation of a bloodline deemed too dangerous, too heretical, for the nascent Christian church to tolerate. For if Christ had married, if he had left a direct descendant, then the very foundations of theological power and apostolic succession as they were being codified would crumble. So, the truth was buried, deep beneath the hallowed ground of Ireland, protected by a lineage of silent guardians, the Druids, then early Christian hermits who understood the deeper mysteries, and much later, those who would become known as the Knights Barad. Templar. They would become the ultimate protectors of this sacred, explosive secret. The implications were staggering. If the Ark of the Covenant had found its final resting place in Ireland, safeguarding an ancient, powerful spiritual lineage, what greater power lay dormant, guarded by the very same forces, infused with the bar? Blood of the Nazarene himself? The Wirrows believed the story ended in Jerusalem. But the whispers in the ancient stones of Ireland spoke of a beginning. A hidden continuation that, centuries later, would lead one determined historian to question everything. Chapter 5. The Serpent and the Shamrock. The Hill of Slane, 432 AD. The air crackled with a primal energy. The ancient Hill of Slane, a place of power long before any Christian saint set foot on Irish soil, thrummed with the heartbeat of the old ways. Torches cast flickering shadows across the faces of the assembled Druids, their eyes gleaming with a mixture of defiance and apprehension. They were the keepers of the land's secrets, the interpreters of its rhythms, and now they were faced with a challenge unlike any they had encountered before. On the eve of Beltane, the most sacred of Celtic festivals, when the veil between worlds thinned and the spirits walked freely, a new fire had been lit. Not the traditional bonfire, kindled by the High Druid after intricate rituals, but a brazen, unauthorized flame, blazing defiantly on the very summit of Slane. The Druids, led by their high priest, a man known only as Cathbad, felt the affront as a physical blow. This was not mere rebellion, it was a challenge to the very soul of Ireland. They knew the source of this audacious act. A foreign missionary, a Romanized Briton who called himself Patrick. He had come to their shores preaching a new god, a single deity, and a gospel that threatened to overturn the ancient balance. The Druids, however, were not mere superstitious pagans. They were the learned class, the philosophers, the historians, and the judges of their society. Their beliefs were deeply intertwined with the land itself, with the cycles of nature, and with a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses who embodied the forces of the universe. They recognized the power in the natural world, the spirits that dwelled in the stones, the trees and the rivers. They saw Patrick's new religion as a dangerous simplification, a threat to the delicate harmony they had maintained for centuries. His message of one God, of heaven and hell, seemed crude and simplistic compared to the nuanced understanding of interconnectedness that formed the heart of their world. As Patrick's fire burned on the summit, Cathbad and his druids gathered at the base of the hill, their faces illuminated by the flickering light. They chanted ancient incantations, calling upon the spirits of the land to rise and defend their sacred space. They invoked the names of their gods, Danu, the mother goddess, Lugh, the god of light, and Morrigan, the goddess of war and fate. Patrick, however, was not easily intimidated. He descended the hill, meeting the druids with a calm resolve that belied the fire in his eyes. He carried no weapon, only a simple wooden staff and a sprig of shamrock, a three-leafed plant that grew abundantly on the island. He spoke to the druids not with threats, but with reason. He told them of his God, a God of love and forgiveness, who offered salvation to all who believed. He used the shamrock to illustrate the concept of the Holy Trinity, 3 in 1, a concept that, while foreign, resonated with the druids' own understanding of interconnectedness. The confrontation was not a physical battle, but a clash of ideologies. The druids saw Patrick's message as a threat to their power and their way of life. Patrick saw the druids as obstacles to the truth, as keepers of a darkness that needed to be dispelled. The High King Leaguer, drawn by the commotion, arrived on the hill. He, like many of his people, was torn between the old ways and the new. He saw the power in Patrick's words, the conviction in his eyes, but he also respected the wisdom of the druids, the guardians of Ireland's ancient soul. The king declared a trial by fire, a test to determine whose god was more powerful. Patrick, unharmed, emerged from the flames, while a druid was consumed. This event, along with other demonstrations of Patrick's power and charisma, swayed Leaguer and many of his people. The conversion of the High King marked a turning point in Irish history. The Druids, though their power waned, did not disappear. Their knowledge, their stories, and their connection to the land were woven into the fabric of the new Christian faith, creating a unique blend of Celtic spirituality and Christian doctrine that would shape Ireland for centuries to come. Yet, beneath the surface of this apparent conversion, beneath the new churches and monasteries that sprang up across the land, the old ways persisted. The ancient sites, the sacred groves, and the hidden knowledge were not forgotten. They were simply veiled, waiting for a time when their secrets would be revealed once again.
You're listening to ITR
Irish Tourist Radio.
Podcast.